bring into the conversation here. National security expert and friend of LiveNOW, Kempfer, and also former intelligence officer, Matthew Shoemaker. And gentlemen, thanks so much for being with us. I know you guys have been on TV a lot today talking about all of this. My first question, though, to you, Hal, is this Israel's 9/11? Because this is not an incursion by the IDF, kind of a pinpoint there in Gaza or the West Bank. This is not like the second or first Intifada. This is not like some skirmishes outside the Temple Mount. This is different. Why?
You literally have to go back 50 years, almost to the day, to get a sense for this, because this is much more like the Yom Kippur war. Yom Kippur completely caught Israel off guard. They were surprised. They were a little overconfident by what they did in the Six-Day War in '67. They thought they had it all figured out. And then Yom Kippur happened, and they almost got pushed away. They almost got pushed back. And those who were there in charge never forget that, just how close they came. This has some of the same characteristics. Now, in terms of raw numbers, no, it's not as big as 9/11. Not as many total people were killed. Not as many total people were injured. So in that regard, no. But in proportionate numbers, yes. If you look at the number of people who are killed, the number of people injured, it's catastrophic. But also the number of people who've been, number of Israeli citizens who have been taken hostage and are being held in the Gaza Strip. That's the one we don't know. I've heard numbers today in the dozens. I've heard one number said 50. I heard a very recent estimate that it could be up in the hundreds of potential Israeli hostages that are there. And that makes it very difficult for Israel, because we talk about, they're going to strike back. They're going to, aim for the tunnel system. Yeah, they're doing it now. You saw it. They're aiming for their command and control nodes. They're aiming for ammunition supplies. Any place they can hit. They have a fairly lengthy target list. The problem is they don't know if Hamas is going to use these Israeli citizens as human shields. I think it would be wise to say, yes, they are. But that makes it very difficult. Now, Israel could say, look, we don't negotiate with terrorists. You can say that. But if you have an Israeli civilian up there who is essentially like a tethered goat, if you will, it makes it very difficult to make a targeting decision on hitting a particular building. So it's like their 9/11. In some ways, it's even worse, because it's not going to happen. 9/11 was over on 9/11 for the most part. This is going to keep going and going and going.
Sure. Yeah. Bibi Netanyahu just put on the social media platform X that this is going to be a long war, and it starts today. I want to put this up. I mean, these are incredible footage that we're getting in from over, I believe, Gaza. I want to bring into the conversation, though, Matthew Shoemaker. Matthew, thanks for being with us. My question to you, though, is this. This was so coordinated. That's why this was, somewhat so successful, because of the coordination, the precision of all of this being carried out by Hamas militants and fighters. And you had it from all sides and all mediums, from the air, from the land, from the sea. I was even seeing, parachutes dropping into southern Israel by these Hamas fighters. The coordination must have taken so much legwork, yet it seems like Israel was caught off guard. Do people in your circles tonight feel that way too, that somewhat of a failure was at play here because Israel was so caught on their back foot?
Well, Andrew, thanks very much for having me. And you're absolutely right. From the moment the first group of black-clad fighters crossed the border from Gaza into southern Israel, it was absolutely clear that this was an extraordinary moment of success, however bloody and fleeting it might be for Hamas. It's also clear that they could not have done this alone. The timing is also no coincidence. Israeli and Saudi Arabian leaders said recently that they were close to a historic peace deal, and Iran wants to sabotage peace between Israel and Arab states. The thing that I'm actually more interested in is the Biden administration's response. It's been nothing short of astonishing in my estimation of its weakness. There never seems to be a sense of urgency with this president. We saw it this morning when it took him hours to release a statement, and the danger of that has become obvious today. It really is rather extraordinary, both in terms of the failure that Mossad, the Israeli intelligence organization was not able to catch this, but also in the response from the West itself.
Okay, Hal, Matthew, speaking of that, Mark Esper, the former Secretary of Defense in the Trump administration, was on with Neil Cavuto today. And he says this: I think that is a significant part of this. It was a surprise. It caught the Israelis completely off guard, and you can't say anything, but it was an intelligence failure. And I think, look, we're dealing with a tactical situation on the ground, which is terrible and tragic for both the Israeli citizens and the Israeli military. I mean, Hal, Israel, the IDF, the Israeli security state, thinks about things like this on a 24/7 basis, don't they? And so you have that fact. And of course, the United States provides so much military and financial aid to Israel as well. That is what is so stunning and surprising to a lot of people who follow Mideast politics so closely, right?
Well, this is something I've seen, all right, and I don't have it quantified. One of the things I've seen, I'm sure Matt's seen the same thing in the last couple of years, there's been a number of reports of human intelligence assets, reportedly Shin Bet or something like that, that Hamas had found out and that they summarily executed or something like that. And then about a year ago, there was a rather famous human intelligence operation that Israel was doing that kind of went sideways completely, and it caused a lot of introspection. So what you might be seeing is a longer term plan of eliminating human intelligence assets that Israel has within the Gaza Strip, which means they have to lean more on the technical assets. Now, the technical means a collection. You're talking signals intelligence, you're talking imagery intelligence, infrared, some other things like that. But those are things that can be defeated by simple things. For example, don't use your phones, don't use a radio, don't send an email. Send a courier, a human being with a message across town. If you don't have somebody there who can actually read that message, to see that message, it's very difficult to intercept it. Same thing with all that urban terrain, all those tunnels. Very difficult to see the movement of people, weapons, all sorts of things. I think Hamas has planned this for years. I think the degree of preparation, as Matt alluded to, means that they probably had outside help. I would say more likely than not Iran, because Iran has been in there. Al-Quds have been in the Gaza Strip. I would say they're providing all sorts of assistance to them in this regard, and literally playing Israel's strengths as weaknesses, if you will. And I will tell you that we have done this in our own wargaming, where we will go in there and red team our own systems. And we've known for years that if you do something as simple as putting a courier on a motorcycle, you can defeat a whole array of intelligence gathering things that we have. And I think that's kind of what they've done here. And obviously for Israel, a lot of introspection here. From an intelligence failure standpoint, this is as big as Yom Kippur, but it's also as big, if you want to compare it to the U.S. with 9/11, and I would go back and say Pearl Harbor.
Wow.
In terms of just the complete intelligence failure to anticipate what was coming.
Okay, I want to talk about the Israeli response now toward Hamas. You're already seeing it play out in real time as we speak. And some Israeli and U.S. officials, Western officials, are calling for the complete and utter destruction of Hamas in the wake of all of this. I just want to go into some of the politics on the ground there in the Palestinian Authority. Where is the Palestinian Authority? I know Secretary of State Antony Blinken, he got on the phone with Mahmoud Abbas, but the PA is different than Hamas. Help us explain that, Matthew, because Abbas can't just call this off, right?
Well, that is certainly true. Abbas, his hands are really tied with regards to the way that Hamas conducts itself. Hamas has pretty much been in control of the Gaza Strip since 2006, actually. And Hamas has been controlled is probably a stronger term for it, but it's certainly been extraordinarily supplied by the Iranians themselves. There have been enormous amounts of secret trade routes, if you will, in order to get supplies to Hamas in the Gaza Strip from Iran. Some of these routes stretch between 200 feet underground, interestingly enough, within Gaza itself. That means that they've had an extraordinarily large amount of time to prepare for this. And at the same time, though, too, with regards to how the Palestinian Authority could try and rein them in, they've never really had the opportunity to do it. They don't have the manpower to do it. And quite frankly, there doesn't really seem to even be the political will to do that, because I'm sure at some level there is an extraordinary amount of sympathy amongst at least the notion of trying to get back as the Israelis. Now, from my understanding, a number of residents within Gaza itself, or within the Gaza Strip itself, blame Hamas for the living standards that they are currently living in. They oftentimes have rolling blackouts with regards to power and energy, and their school systems are absolutely atrocious. So a number of the individuals on the ground, at least citizens, view Hamas quite negatively, but whether or not the Palestinian Authority itself ever wants to tackle that does not seem to be the case today.
Okay, and we're just showing you some of these just incredible scenes out of, I believe this is over Gaza or Gaza City. There you can just see that layer, that haze of smoke from all the shelling the IDF has done. Because to your point, Hal and Matthew, Hamas hides in neighborhoods, in buildings like schools, hospitals, warehouses. They really, infiltrate themselves within, everyday environments, and so that is what we're seeing right now, that the IDF is pinpointing them, and they have told, or they being Israel and the Netanyahu government have said, the military is giving civilians in Gaza, this is according to Trey Yanks, very specific evacuation instructions, telling them to move deeper into the Strip in multiple areas. Oh, look at that, wow. Okay, and so I'm reading from Trey's tweet. He says it appears Israel will soon start a heavier ground and or air response, and you're seeing that now. I'm just going to bring up some of the natural sound on this so we can listen while we talk about this. To your point as well about the Iran question, the Iran angle, I don't want to show this tweet because I think it's somewhat detestable to a lot of us. Ayatollah Khamenei tweeted this today. Or no, I'm sorry, he tweeted this on October 3rd. The usurper regime is coming to an end. Today, the Palestinian youth and the anti-oppression, anti-occupation movement in Palestine is more energetic, more alive, and more prepared than ever during the past 70 or 80 years. God willing, the movement will achieve its goals. We know what that goal is. That goal is the destruction of Israel off the map there in the Middle East. So we're seeing right now, you're seeing some of these strikes take place in and over Gaza City. It's about 3:30 on a very, very early Sunday morning. But Hal, to that point, Iran is relishing all of this, aren't they?
Well, absolutely. And I think Iran has probably had a hand in this since the very beginning. It's beyond imagination that Tehran did not have an idea that this was coming, that this was something that Hamas had cooked up on their own. There's some characteristics, land, sea, air. They did maritime, they went through the fence, they came through tunnels that they'd prepared, and they did paragliding. Paragliding is not something that you just casually do. By the way, paragliding isn't something you can train for in the Gaza Strip without the Israelis noticing that you're doing paragliding training, which indicates that they probably were trained someplace else. That someplace else could have been Syria, it could have been Iran. Those would be my top two on the list of places, I think. But if you look at the sophistication, the planning, and the types of assault that was done, it does indicate they had help from outside. Now, something else that kind of sticks out on this that I want to point to. 3,000 missiles were fired at the Iron Dome. Those missiles are Qassam missiles. I call them flying trash cans. They're really stupid. They're not precision. They just go up there, but you have to use a precision weapon to take them out, and that's what the Iron Dome does. So what they've done is they've significantly depleted the Iron Dome's ammunition inventory, if you will, going after these flying trash cans. Meanwhile, to the north, Hezbollah, which is Iran's big proxy, is sitting in southern Lebanon and Syria with what may be up to 150,000 missiles. I mean, wow. It's staggering when you look at them. And those missiles have far better range, far better targeting capability, and if this is Iran, and if this is more than just a fit of pique, if you will, a very sophisticated fit of pique by Hamas, if this is something that's larger and more orchestrated, the first thing you'd want to do is something that would deplete that Iron Dome's response capability before you launched other missiles. So
okay, Hal,
even though everyone's focused on Gaza Strip, I'm looking north right now. I want to
wow.
see what's going on up north.
Okay, Hal, to your point, though, Barack Ravid there, I believe with Axios, tweeted this. This is his reporting, some reporting about the phone call that took place between President Biden and Bibi Netanyahu, saying Netanyahu asked Biden during their phone call for emergency U.S. funding for the purchase of more interceptors for the Iron Dome missile defense system. And so that's to your point right there.
It's this is and at the end of the day, if you end up having something where, say, Israel, if they were to be hit by those missiles up north, if that was to happen, or if there's somehow within the Gaza Strip hidden another 3,000 missiles or something, we don't know how many total of these Qassam missiles they have, but if that happens and they are depleted, they're going to first ask for more help with air defense. As Israel is unfolding the ground battle, they're going to need artillery, they're going to need tank rounds, they're going to need a lot of other things. And if this gets beyond the Gaza Strip and up north where they're having to go into southern Lebanon or perhaps even into Syria, now we're talking a huge ammunition pull. That ammunition pull is taking from the very same ammunition that is currently earmarked to go to Ukraine.
Oh, okay.
And so we might be looking at something even bigger than this. And I'm going to say there is a strong connection between Tehran and Moscow. And I'll leave it at that.
Matthew, before we go to break, I just want to talk about the role Israel will now play in Gaza. In the early aughts, I don't want to say they left, but yeah, they did. Israelis got out of Gaza. They were no longer occupying Gaza. Will we see another occupation of Gaza by Israel after all of this, do you think?
I think that the chances of that are increasing as we speak. The way that the conservative government within Israel itself is probably going to want to react to this is to clamp down as hard as they can to make sure that this doesn't happen again. They've certainly been burned now, if you will, with regards to they did not see this coming, and they're in a state of shock to a certain extent with regards to this. So the chances of Israel returning to the Gaza Strip to control it at this point are certainly rising with each passing day with regards to this.